What's up, everyone? Alex here, and welcome to another identity talk video. I'm trying to pump these out before I end up not having access to Adobe Creative Cloud because I canceled my payments on that. Like the the Creative Cloud is like my video editing software, my Photoshop and everything. So I'm trying to get as much work done as I can before payments like officially cancel. I'll probably bring it back like next month, but that's a whole other issue that I have to deal with. So today I wanted to talk about, I guess, an easier and more accurate way of describing my gender experience and all of the pieces that make up that experience. I think I've discovered something that makes a little bit more sense in explaining what my experience is, what my gender is. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. And I wanted to actually open up with a screenshot of something that I posted on Discord because I thought that, I don't know, I guess it was in the context of gender. We were like talking about something, and I had made a very good point that I wanted to incorporate into a video. So I wanted to share this screenshot that I have where I said that I find my femininity to be queer. My masculinity, I'm not sure how to describe it. I guess I just consider it tied to my demi-boy identity, and I consider it important for me for passing. It's like baseline at my core, I'm masculine and I come off that way, binder, beard, and build. But I have that added layer of femininity because I specifically want to be seen as a gender non-conforming man. Thus, the queerness in my femininity, some unconventional part of my identity that doesn't define my gender but is separate from it and defies what people expect of me masculinity-wise. It's not a blend of feminine and masculine, it's not androgyny, it's a distinct layer of identity. And then, of course, I added, I hope that makes sense because my autism brain doesn't quite. I guess I'm not the best at explaining this sort of thing, but I wanted to open with that screenshot because I thought that was a really good idea to like dive into that kind of self-exploration, and I finally got this stuff down on paper. Like I finally broke down that screenshot like line for line and articulated a little bit better like what I meant by layers of identity and why I consider my femininity to be queer but not other parts of me. So I talked about my identity being described as having layers. I talked about masculinity in a video, which I'm hoping I'll remember to put on the end card for this video. If not, maybe it's in the description. It's pretty easy to find. If you look on my channel, one of the older videos is going to be about why masculinity is important to me. I don't consider masculinity or femininity to define my gender or to be an intrinsic part of it. I find it more to be like masculinity is important for me so that I can pass as my gender. That I've explained before, but I don't think the masculinity defines my gender. I think no matter what gender I am, I think the masculinity is still there. It doesn't matter what I decide to call myself. I still want to come off as masculine. And I consider these like layers of identity to be separate parts of one whole. I don't consider myself to be multi-gendered. I don't experience like gender fluidity or anything like that. And I don't consider all of the parts of my identity to really define what my gender is. I think it's just kind of coming together into one identity that like includes gender, but it doesn't all translate to gender. I hope that makes sense. I do have it broken down here because I feel like I had a really good idea for this, and I'm almost sure somebody out there experiences the same exact thing that I do and can relate to what I guess have to say here. So layers, at my core, the anchoring point of who I am and what I'm about, that is where I think that I would find myself to be masculine. That is where masculinity lies. It doesn't define my gender. Like, I'm not my gender because I'm masculine. I'm not masculine because of my gender, but I find it important to be able to pass masculinely just as like a gender euphoria type thing. Like I want to be seen as male. I know I say demi boy, non-binary man, gender queer man, but I still like I'm still a man, and I still consider myself. I still consider myself wanting to pass masculinely, and no matter how many layers are on top of this like core identity, it's still me. It's unchanging, I would say. On top of that layer, I would call the gender layer. Whatever I am labeling it, either like my demi boyhood, my non-binariness, transness. Trans isn't a gender, but it's a descriptor of a gender. Same with demi. Like, I could use a million different words to describe like my gender layer, but it's still tied to being masculine. It's still tied to that importance of being able to pass. So I guess it's just masculinity at my core and a layer of that gender on top, but not like they're not like the same thing. I don't consider them interchangeable. I just consider them like how would I explain that? I guess they're related, but that's about it. But they're not interchangeable. I don't think so. Like, I don't really consider gender to be at my core, if that makes sense. Because I think that no matter what gender, like, I'm still me, and there's still that unchanging part of myself. And that would be, I guess, the need to be masculine in nature. I am, I guess, slowly adopting this new language of being masculine in nature, feminine in nature. I think that is a more intrinsic part of someone's identity than like gender. Gender's a little more complicated. And from my personal experience, I find gender and masculinity to be two separate things. And then on top of that, a very thin layer I would call the presentation layer, the outward appearance, the outward expression of myself, not necessarily the expression of my gender, because this is where you would see like my femininity. Like, it's very flexible. Sometimes I'm feminine, sometimes I'm more neutral, a little more masculine leaning. But this presentation layer is thin, flexible, and not anything that defines what my gender is. It is a separate experience where, I mean, I said that I wanted to be considered and seen as a gender non-conforming man. So that's why I consider femininity to be completely separate from who I am as a person. It is just the outward appearance. It's just a preference that is subject to change. So, like, I could dress in anything. I could present myself with any kind of like clothing or pronouns, and I like still at my core, I would still consider myself male. I would still consider myself wanting to pass as someone who is masculine with a slightly queer presentation. The presentation layer I consider the queer part of my identity. I don't consider the whole of the identity to be queer. I don't think a lot of anything else diverges. I think it's that outer layer that is the queer part, I guess. Because that's where you would find like the gender non-conforming part. That's where you would find me queering gender, breaking expectations of like who I am as a man. Like, you would expect me to present a certain way, to look a certain way, but it's not what people would expect. In my case, like wearing like slightly feminine clothing, dressing more neutrally, using gender terms, specific gender terms that may not fit what other people expect of a man. This is where, like, this layer I would consider my name and my pronouns would be here as well, subject to change. And no matter what those things are, I am still my gender. I am still who I am at my core as well. I consider the presentation layer to be visibly separate from my being male. It's like I said, I want to be seen as a gender nonconforming man. I don't want to pass androgynously. I don't want to pass as being like fluid or feminine. I don't want to be seen as like genderless or anything like that. That is not the point of having this layer. It's more like it's almost an experimental layer that could change at any time, and I could, pick and choose elements that I want to keep and throw away other things that like don't really fit what I'm looking for this part of my identity. But like I said, this is where you would find also like the pronouns. Like I use he him pronouns. That is it causes the most gender euphoria for me, is using he him pronouns, and it does tie in with being male. For me, like if I'm trying to pass as male, it helps, like, because traditionally he him is used for men, but in a perfect world, those pronouns, like I wouldn't consider the he him pronouns to even be necessary. And as you know, I use am pronouns online, am airs. I guess I could put that on screen there to show the full set, but I use those almost exclusively online, and like that, I guess, is part of that outward appearance, part of that like queerness on the outside where that thin layer is. And I mean, that could change. I could decide that I don't like those pronouns and I could adopt completely new pronouns. I don't know about that yet. That's a different video entirely, but I guess that is the best way to describe how I view the complexity of my gender. I had explained that I consider my gender to be very complex, but it's static. It's one gender with many parts. Like I don't consider myself having more than one gender. But shout out to people who do have more than one gender. I think that's pretty cool. That's a very interesting experience, I'm sure. But for me, it's just parts that make up the whole. So just to recap, at the core, I've got myself as a person, experiences with gender, and with everything else around me that influence who I am. Like that is just who I am at my core. And I guess like that's where I would find like that masculinity, like the masculine element of my identity. The gender layer, definitely male, but with a debatable relationship to maleness, and with a definite partial relationship to such. So like I consider myself partially male, but all in all still male, just not in the same way that a cis man might experience malehood. Presentation layer, thin little layer. I know I keep making gestures. In my brain, I see the core as like a planet, and the layers around it to be rings. I think that that's the best way to describe it. Not layers of a cake, not something like flat like that. I think it's a little more complicated than that. It's like my core and then all of these parts that encompass that core. I think that's like the best way to visualize it. But presentation layer, the feminine to neutral presentation that I've been experimenting with, that's not tied to my maleness, and it's not tied to any need to pass a certain way, or to like make people think that I might be like genderless or androgynous or whichever, an ungendered being. That's not what I'm going for there. And of course, like I had said, names, pronouns, that's part of that layer, and gendered language, like what kind of terminology I prefer to be called, honorifics to, might be like part of that. So my preferred gender language, very flexible in that like part of the identity, definitely subject to change, subject to a lot of experimentation. So I mean, that's that's the best way I can describe how I might see myself, and how, I guess, like, I always talk about, like, I have parts of an identity that make up that entire identity, but I never really got into the details of what that means. So it's a bit of a weird video. It's a bit of a weird way to describe things. I don't think I've ever heard of anyone describe their gender as having multiple parts that make up one concise whole identity. I think it's a lot more fluid for people. I mean, a lot of people have multiple genders. A lot of people consider gender to not apply to them, or they don't see it as tied to anything about themselves as a person. I mean, that's where I guess we have the question of the month. And I wanted to explain here, I'll probably put a different video up to explain this as well, just so people don't miss it. But I am doing a question of the month instead of a question of the week. I have no idea why I decided to call it the question of the week to begin with, because Identity Talk only goes up once a month. So, and sometimes I try to get like all other like filler videos to sort of tie in with Identity Talk. I'm a little more loose with that kind of thing right now, but that's how the original format was. Identity Talk is like the main topic of the month, and you get a question that viewers can like answer, and then everything else that I upload after that kind of ties in with that main like talking point for the month. I kind of did away with that format, but I still want to keep, I kind of want to loosely keep that kind of format. So I decided to call it the question of the month now. And I'll be putting up an announcement in my Discord server, and also like a video announcement explaining that, because I did have some people who were very confused. Like, why do you call it the question of the week? The next question didn't even go up. Like, what happened? And it's like, oh, like the question of the week is the week that Identity Talk goes up. And then I realized it goes up once a month. It's not a once a week thing, so I don't think question of the week makes sense. I guess it kind of segues into the question of the month. How complex is your gender experience? Pretty simple. And I'm going to have people answer this in the comments, and I can reply to the comments, and I can reply to this question in my Discord server. But I had accidentally decided not to I decided not to post the question in my Discord server on time, so we don't actually have answers to the question in the Discord server. But I will ask it here, and then you can answer down below, like how complex is your identity? How complex is your experience with gender? That can mean anything. Like, how do you describe that experience? Is it multiple layers? Is it multiple parts of a whole? Is it more like fluid? Do you have more than one gender? Are you fluid between those genders, or is it multiple static identities? You could answer it in either way, and I will try to respond to as many as I can. Still on that, I'm still on that track where I'm responding to every single comment that I get, and so far so good. Between both my channels, I have replied to every single comment I've ever gotten, other than like the spam stuff, because that just gets deleted. But I mean like public comments, so anything that actually like goes up in the comment section. And that's, I guess, all I have for today. Uploads might be a little spotty. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do a lot of the filler content that I normally do, because I upload once a week, and it's like Identity Talk and then some kind of queer video that has something to do either with Identity Talk or with gender or sexuality in general. Like that's the kind of format I'm trying to keep. So I don't actually know what's going to go up next month, actually, or next week. I mean, I should have looked at that. If I get the chance, next week, I am talking about male-related terms that I coined, and I'm showing off like flags that I made for these identities. So over at the Gender Collector himself, that's my blog on Tumblr. I always have that in the description. I plug it as much as I can. I talk about my own experiences, like terms that I relate to. I share a lot of other people's work, but more so, I also share my own work and my own flags and identity labels that I've coined and stuff like that. So if you're ever interested in that kind of thing, I have a super inclusive blog over there that you can check out. I'm just turning the pages on my I have this notebook where I write the outlines to my episodes, and I'm just turning the page to the next topic, just so I remember to have it there. But yeah, I'm gonna be doing that, and I might have my boyfriend on for a video in a couple weeks. I'm not sure yet. It depends on if I can find the time for it, but I wanted to show off some stuff that some hobbyist things that he's into. So look forward to that, I guess, and maybe another Animal Crossing town tour. I don't know if it's been long enough, but maybe I could just play Animal Crossing, show off what I've done in my town, and just kind of talk. Use it as a way to like vlog, but also show off some like cool video game stuff, because just I'm still a gamer at heart. I still like doing gaming on YouTube, even if it's been a very long time since I've done so. But yeah, I guess that's kind of like what you can expect this month if I have the time. If I'm able to like catch up on editing all the content before my payment plan runs out for Adobe, because I don't know if I'll be able to have access to Photoshop or Adobe Premiere Pro, but we'll see what happens. And I am signing off for now. See you later.